Joe, what we're doing here today is you're about ready to show me a tree that you've fallen in love with to turn into a handmade bow.
That's right. This is an absolute beauty of an Osage orange, or hedge apple, as most people call it.
Okay, and so it's exactly what this is, right?
Correct.
And this is a bow that you spent many hours getting this exact right shape, and it takes a lot of know-how to get this at the right moisture and to bend it exactly right and to shape this the way you've got it done here. But you don't do this just for fun. You do this because this is your hunting bow, right?
Right, yeah.
And you've taken several deer with this bow and some turkey as well, right?
I have.
There's something about the simplicity of this piece.
When you go in the woods with the compound, you're packing a gadget bag, a rangefinder, arrows, release. You have so much stuff that by the time you get up in your tree, you're feeling labor.
Tell me a couple reasons why you like this particular tree.
Well, Osage typically looks like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The next tree over is really knotty, and you can actually look at the bark and see that it swirls around the tree. It's not growing straight. This one, I mean, I'm willing to bet when I cut this tree and split it, it's going to split pretty much straight. This is a very good stave in that it's split very straight. The grain is good.
So this is one that you're currently starting to work on, right? So what I'd like to do is to follow you through this all the way to shooting it someday.
Okay.
Now, we're not going to be able to do it with this tree. And the reason being is when you cut that, you're going to then store that wood for about a year before you get started, right?
Yes.
And you're already here, same kind of wood, same type of wood. This is probably going to be your 2019, 2020 bows potentially.
I've got a few staves put away to work on, but this is a tree that's just absolutely perfect.
From start to finish, you're telling me this is about a 45-hour project?
That's what I had in my first one.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a couple hours to cut the tree and prepare the staves, seal them, get all that ready. And then you're looking at another 40 hours with a draw knife and a rasp, basically, working out the bow. When I get down to really close to the final tiller, I'll use a paint scraper.
We'll let this tree live another day, and we'll get started on what we got.
Sounds good.
All right, that sounds great. So Joe, you picked an Osage tree, but now you're going to show us how to cut a stave, and this is actually a locust, correct?
Correct, this is black locust.
So the process of getting the stave out to build a bow is the same no matter what type of wood you're using for the most part?
Essentially, you've got two types of wood. You know, you've got Osage and white woods, and locust is one that can be treated either as a white wood or like Osage in that you can chase a ring.
Okay.
You see how the rings are well defined here?
Yes.
Generally, you want the stave to be equal to your height.
Okay.
And most people, if they span their arms, that's going to be pretty close to what their height is. So when I'm cutting a tree, I'll go, okay,
there you go.
There's where I want to cut it, right there.
Yeah.
That's my measuring stick.
This is obviously split, so you're going to utilize that split.
It's got a check in it where moisture is escaping, or it had, whatever fault it may have had. So I'm going to take advantage of that. There's a couple of checks actually. The easiest bow to make is here where you've got wider rings. And that just makes it easier to chase. If you make a mistake, you haven't nicked completely through that ring. This wood is a little tighter grain, but easily you've got a bow in this. You've got potentially, you've got a bow here and another bow here, and maybe, I don't know what kind of a deformity is there, so you might be able to cut it off and make a kid's bow. But when I split out these staves, that's how I'm going to kind of pick where I put the splits after I do the initial, the initial split.
Okay. There we go. days, it may work again. This thing's almost getting manageable.
You know, I'm gonna cut that in half, make sure I've got enough room for a bow there. Even though I drew that out as this would be a for sure one bow, I'm taking a gamble that I'm gonna get 2, possibly 3 out of this. And once you hit it, you can't take it back.
All right, we got these. Let's get them up there and show us the next stage.
Okay, sounds good.
So now you're just going to put this in to hold it so you can remove some of the wood off of it.
Yes. Once you get down to the actual wood.
Whoops! And you can kind of tell when the wood's there, it's going to be this color.
Yes, it's going to have a little different,
a little bit darker,
a little different color.
Because this wood here is a little soft, right?
Yeah, this is still the inner bark. But something that's very important is that when you get this wood ready to dry, there's no question, when did I get that? When did I put that up?
So once you get to this stage right here, it really is seal it with polyurethane, ends and back, and then put it up, and
A couple years if you can.
couple years even. So you always keep a couple in the works. This one's been stored and dried and is ready to go, right?
This one's 3 years. Yes.
So the next process is
chasing a ring on Osage.
okay.
So I've secured that. You can see I'm down to a ring there, and I've got 2 rings on top of it. So my goal is to take off those rings one at a time. And once I get this to a complete ring, and I'm happy with the way that's looking, I'll then draw the bow profile on the side of the stave.
Okay. We're going to go through the next stage of this, which is
Laying out the bow.
we're going to lay out the bow. And first and foremost is the center.
You got to find the center. The center is where your finger is going to pivot, just shy of 29. So this is going to be my center. I'm going to mark it on the side as well as the back of the bow.
Okay.
That's where I'm going to grip the bow, the fulcrum of the bow.
That's essentially where the arrow's going to reside, right there above.
Well, the arrow's going to be above that,
A little above
an
that.
inch and a half maybe.
Okay.
That's the grip. That's the fulcrum of the bow.
Okay.
So now, if you've got a handle profile that you like, you can lay that up there, get the back even, and just kind of do your side profile like that.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, an arrow shelf, I like to do it about an inch and a half. So, and I like it to have a little bit of an arch to it so that it has a minimal amount of contact with the arrow. I know my limb thickness is going to be, you know, no more than a half an inch. So I will basically rough it out like that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the same here. You're gonna need to have a fade area where the bow transitions from handles to the limbs. And the way I've drawn this, essentially this is the fades. I usually measure this, but I used another bow of my preferred pattern to get to that point. And it depends on whether you're making a pyramid bow, a pyramid meaning it starts the widest at the fades and goes directly to the apex where the tips are. If you've got a reasonably straight stave, you can lay this on the center, and you find your center, and I'll mark, you know, a point 3/8 of an inch each side of that, and that's going to give me a little wider than a half-inch tip that will let me narrow that down later on.
Okay.
One thing that you also want to take in consideration, this has a little bit of a snake meander to it. A knot, like you see right here, you're better off to have it where it is now than right on the edge of the bow.
Gotcha. You don't want, okay.
You don't want that weakness, you know, because if you cut through that knot on the edge, you've created a weak spot.
Gotcha.
And I like to do a pyramid bow. Some people will come up halfway, keep this the same width, halfway, and they start their taper at the halfway point. And this makes a really interesting bow in and of itself. This is going to be a safe limb design for this bow given this knot.
Gotcha, okay.
If I had done a pyramid bow to the tip, this knot's going to be a problem.
It's going to be right on the edge.
It's going to be right on the edge, and I don't want that. And I've got another knot that you can't see from this side. There is another knot here that when I go to chasing that ring is going to be complicating as well. So I want to keep this width what it is. Another thing, you mark both sides of the bow. Here's my fade. So I know when I go to whittling on that.
Mm-hmm. Stay way out.
Stay way outside the line. Leave the lines on the wood, and everything is good.
You'll take a saw and saw that out?
I'll get on a bandsaw and I'll whack off this. You can do it with a hand saw as well.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be real careful here around the fades,
mm-hmm.
but I get rid of most of that.
Gotcha.
With a saw. It saves me a lot of time.
Okay.
It takes, it goes from being a 40-hour bow to being a 15, 20-hour bow.
Yeah.
If you're not removing this with a draw knife or a rasp. That's a lot of wood.
I'm really looking forward to seeing how this bow takes shape. Last time we split a couple of staves from a downed tree.
And once you hit it, you can't take it back.
Then we also drew an outline on a dried stave in preparation for cutting and shaping. Now, this is the very next step after what you showed us before. You went and you've cut this out. Now what?
Well, I have gone in and put antler tips on this. I use fast flight strings,
mm-hmm.
and that helps to increase the longevity of the tips.
What would you do to it after this point right here?
Now I am trying to get the limbs even,
mm-hmm.
and I use the stave press. So I'll flex the limb and look at how things are moving. And it's moving pretty evenly. It's still a little stiff up here by the fades, and I can feel that. I take my hand and run down the wood, and you can feel the thicknesses.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And you can see, you feel a little bit of a thin spot right here. That could develop into a hinge, and when I look at it, when I'm bending it, it bends more there than it does anywhere else. So I'm looking, and actually I can see a little bit of where I've gone through that growth ring. You see mm-hmm. that dark spot?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say no to here. Don't get that, but everywhere else.
You're gonna remove a little bit?
I'm gonna remove a little bit. I'll go in there with this paint scraper.
That's a paint scraper?
That's a paint scraper. I'm to the point where the draw knife might be just a little bit too aggressive.
Mm-hmm. So it's the stage in between a draw knife and sandpaper. That's a paint scraper.
Paint scraper. So now I'll feel it for any scratches that I might have put in a corner. You don't want it to have sharp corners. You want to round those off, because when you go to bending it, that's where it'll break.
It'll splinter there, yeah.
So you want to make sure you don't have any of that, and I'm pretty happy with that, so I'll flip it around. That limb is bending. Those may be more even now.
Now that you got your limbs, they're bending pretty similar.
Right.
And this is how you test this. Is there any other way to test this?
Putting the string on it.
Okay.
And I'm going to do that here in just a second.
I'll tell you, looking from here, they look pretty even. It looks pretty good.
Another thing that I look for when you do that is where your string is lining up.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't quite have it braced to be able to tell for sure, but you want the string to be running. If it lays anywhere on the handle, you're good.
Mm-hmm. All right, fantastic. So now we've got this stage. Where would you go from here?
So I'll take off even amounts of wood off both limbs until I get to the desired draw weight.
So Joel, the next time we see you, you're going to finish these limbs out to the appropriate weight, to make sure they bend right. And you're going to take a rasp and you're going to put this handle in, right?
I'll have it roughed in where I can shoot at least.
Joe, we're back here for our third trip, and we're going to get to shoot this thing today, right?
That's right.
So you've done quite a bit since we were here last. Obviously, it's pretty obvious to see that you put a shelf on it, and you've also worked on the handle.
I have.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I like to make it fit my hand and get as narrow as I can. But you have to make sure that you don't weaken this enough that this is the weakest point. You want the limbs to bend, and you really don't want that to bend, because if it bends here, it'll break in half on you.
And so you kind of put your hand there until it feels right. And you've done this with a rasp and sandpaper, really, right?
Correct.
So it doesn't happen real fast, and you go slow, take little bits at a time. I'm sure you probably grabbed this thing a good 50 to 100 times in the process, did you not?
At least.
And then your shelf here is got a curve to it.
It's got a little bit of a curve to it, and you know, I want minimal contact with the air. Of course, when the arrow, when you shoot it, it flexes and it gets off there anyway, but I think a little bit of a radius to a shelf is an asset, or at least I like to do it.
So tell me what else you've done to it since we've left.
Well, I heat treated it. You can see that the belly of the limbs is a little darker. Many woods will benefit from heat treating. I took a heat gun and basically held it about 4 inches over that and moved it down the length of the limb, and it strengthens the cells. Woods that are weaker in compression tend to take more set, and if you heat treat them, they take less set. I'm constantly making sure there's no splinters or no kind of cross grain violation that could be an issue.
So what's the next step now?
Well, the next step is to see what the tiller looks like.
Okay.
And we'll exercise the limbs a little bit, and then we'll go fling an arrow.
Okay. Now this here is commonly referred to as your brace height.
Right.
How much brace height do you want out of a longbow like this?
Most people will use a fistimule, which is basically putting your thumb on the belly of the riser, and where your thumb tip is about right.
Okay.
Another thing I look at is I want that string to be going down the center of the bow as best possible when you lay it down, and when you look at that from end to end, that's pretty good. I like the way that's looking.
Down pretty good, yeah. So what's our next step after this here?
All right, let's shoot a couple arrows and see how it feels.
Wow, that shot pretty.
Snapped it out there, didn't it?
Snapped it out there pretty good.
And I didn't draw it to my full draw length because, again, I don't want to do that until I've got it to the final tool. But it whipped it.
Hey, that thing shoots pretty well.
Yeah,
I'm impressed.
I'm pleased.
All right, so now we're going to put on a new string that you hand tied and see how it shoots.
I'm probably going to shoot it a few times because I'm going to have to twist it again after I've shot it.
This whole process, we've tried to simplify it as much as we possibly can, but to get all these little tips, it takes two things. It takes some experience, and also, if you wanted to learn a little more about the process before trying to attempt your own bow, is there anything that you'd recommend as far as a good read?
A good read, you know, the Bowyer's Bible, there's volumes 1 through 4. Just a tremendous amount of information there.
I'm sure you could read this entire book here and still not know some of the things they're talking about or understand why until you get your hands on it and start building one. You're going to make some mistakes.
You're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn from your mistakes, more importantly. And we talked about resources, you know, the internet, YouTube.
Another bowyer?
There's some great bowyers that have videos online, just some great information on, you know, from taking a tree down to splitting staves, to storing staves, to making strings, you know, everything. All right, so.
First shot with a new string.
First shot with a new string. Notice what those silencers look like. That's about to change.
They're going to come up to an abrupt stop here in a second.
And I'm going to try to hit that turkey right where his wattles would be. We'll see whether that happens or not. Shot a little left. Little left, so I may not have my knock point right.
Well, Joe, you make a fine bow and arrow. Good luck with this year. I'm going to keep up with you and let me know how this turns out. I'm sure this is going to be the demise of a couple of deer this year.
I will. If luck is with me, I'll be able to get a couple, maybe 4.
Well, that's what the refrigerator hold. That's what I'd take.
That's about what we eat a year.
Well, it's a great piece, and I've enjoyed this whole process of watching you literally take a piece of wood from your property and turn it into this piece of hunting equipment. Thanks again for walking me through it.
You're welcome. It's a good wintertime project, by the way.
Absolutely.